Welcome to this video. In this video we're going to look at creating our own functions. We saw in the previous video us using functions from standard IO. Now we're going to do this quite a lot and you need to get used to this. We want to use functions to reduce repetition and also group our operations together that do a useful task. So first things first, we need to decide on a couple of things with our function, and you need to decide this before you start writing your function. So the first thing that I recommend you do is think about what do you want this function to do, and then you can give it a name. So for this example, we want to calculate f of x and b. So I'm going to call my function calculate f of x, b. It's important that you have a meaningful name here because you're going to use it a lot and you won't have the code alongside it, so it means that anyone can read this and they know what it means. For example, printf, we know that means print formatted. Scanf, we know that means scan formatted, and we can see that quite clearly in the code rather than having to look at the actual function itself. Alright, the next thing we need to decide is what we want out of this function in terms of its type. We don't really care about the algorithm right now, we just care about what comes out. Now, for what we know so far, we can only have 0 or 1 thing returned. We will learn how to have more things returned later on, but right now we can have 0 or 1. And all we need to know right now when designing our function is what's the return type of that thing we want to return, or do we not want to return anything at all? For us, our f of x and b is an int, so we want to return an int. If you were returning a double, then it'd be a double. And if you're returning nothing, then it's going to be void. Okay? Now, what we've got below is the name, and we're going to turn this into the signature of our function. So with our signature, we have the name in the middle, and then we have what's returned at the start. Okay? I mean, the returned type. Okay? So this is the return type. Okay? If we wanted to return a double or a car, or we didn't want to return anything else, we'd change this. Okay? So that would be changed. The next thing we need to think about is what information we need to come into the function to make it work. Okay? And we've seen this with our printf, etc. We can pass information in so that it does different things. Now, for what we know so far, the number of things coming in is going to be fixed. Okay, there are ways to get it so that you can have a variable amount of things coming in, but we haven't learned that yet, and we're not going to learn that in this subject. So for us to get the value out of f of x and b, we know we need two things, and they're going to be two ints, and it's going to be x and b. Okay. So for the things coming in, we put a list in our signature of the things coming in. Okay, so we've got 2, and we separate the things that are coming in with a comma. So I'm going to write this as int x in and int b in. Okay, so this is our signature of our function. Without even writing any of the function's code, it tells me a lot of information. I know that I return an int, I know a little bit about the function itself just by the name, and I know it accepts 2 bits of information, x in and b in. Okay, so let's go into the code and let's actually implement this. Alright, so where we're going to create our function is below main, okay? And each of the functions will be right on the outer line. So there's no indenting of the function, it's what's inside the function that's going to be indented. So the first thing you do is write the signature of the function. So that's going to be int for the return type int, calculate fxb, b, and then what we accept in. So we've got x in and b in. And then we can put some braces, and what goes inside here is the code of our function. I forgot something as well. Alright, now what we need to do also is we need to create a function prototype. So what we do is you need to grab the signature of your function, copy it, and then just paste it above main and then put a semicolon after it. Now you can get away with declaring all of your functions above main, and that gets rid of the need for a function prototype, but then you need to think about the order of your functions. By using a function prototype, it doesn't matter the order that we create these down below. Okay, so it's a lot easier just to create a function prototype. I'm not going to go through the details of why we have to put them in order, but this will make it a lot easier for you while you're learning. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is we can go into this function and put the code in there, and that's basically what we had before. I'm going to change a couple of things around. Now, any of the functions that return something, we need a return, okay, and that's why I added this return here, because main returns an int. Okay, now we are going to return our f of xb. Now I'm going to call this f of xb out, okay, just to differentiate it between the one inside main, and we'll talk about that in a second. Alright, and we need to change x to x in, so we'll go ahead and do that as well. And we'll change b to b in. Now, we also need to go up here, and we need to create our f of xb, and then we'll do our function call on the next line. Before that we do that, what I just want to mention is you'll notice this g of xb is no longer in the scope of this do while loop, and it's actually simplified debugging, because if we have a problem with gxb, we know that it's in the scope of this, and the only place we need to look is inside of this. So we've made this easier for ourselves with problems that might come about. Okay. Now in terms of scope also, your parameter list starts here. These are within scope from here to here. Okay, so up to this brace here. Okay. Now from here we're going to call our function. So it returns something, so I'm going to put that on the left hand side, and then on the right hand side I'm going to put my function's name and then the values that I want to pass. So I could pass 4 and 5, for example. I can pass literals, or I can pass variables. The biggest mistake that a lot of students make when they first start using functions is they'll write int here. That doesn't make sense, okay? Because we want to actually give a value to pass to this function. This here is declaring this variable that's going to be used in this function. So these are called arguments, and these are called parameters. Parameters should have a type, arguments should not have a type. So if you've got int here or something like that, you're doing it wrong. Alright, so given that, that should all work. Now we'll look at how everything's passed in the next video, and this will be really, really important for when it comes to pointers. Okay? Alright, that's it. Thank you.